Okay, so welcome everyone to the World Handicap System, the Rules of Handicapping webinar. My name is Barry Amarin, and I am the Member Services for the Hawaii State Golf Association, as well as your point of contact for any questions or concerns regarding the World Handicap System and GHIN.
And my name is Blake Willard. I'm the PJ Boatwright intern here at the Hawaii State Golf Association, and I'll be helping Barry in the presentation today.
Okay, so just to briefly go over the agenda that we're going to be covering today, we're going to be starting with the introductions, followed by the welcome to the WHS, fundamentals in handicapping, handicap formula, club handicap committee responsibilities, competition committee responsibilities, and then finishing up with the AGA responsibilities, or the administration of a handicap index. Okay, so effective in January 1st, 2020, the World Handicap System will officially be in place as the handicap system for all systems. And from what you can see from the current landscape, the USGA handicap system is the primary system being used today around the world. There are 6 systems representing 80 countries, each system aiming to achieve the same thing, which is to measure a golfer's ability and provide equity for play. But differing results don't translate very well from one to another, and it is a collaborative process from the USGA, the RNA, Council of National Golf Unions, European Golf Association, Golf Australia, Argentine Golf, and the South African Golf. Each of the existing handicap authorities have representation on the World Handicap Operations Committee, and along with the World Handicap Board, they've helped to develop the new World Handicap System. And from a future landscape in 2020, you can see a unified World Handicap System, which enables golfers of different ability to play and compete on a fair and equitable basis in any format, on any course, anywhere around the world. So it will be portable around the world and provide a single measure worldwide for determining a player's ability. And when fully adopted, the World Handicap System will be governed by the USGA and the RNA and administered by national and multinational associations around the world, with safeguards included to ensure consistency as well as adaptability to different golf cultures. And since golf is a global game, it only makes sense that the way we use handicaps will be as well. So for the governance, there will be one World Handicap System to be consistent with other governance functions. The World Handicap System will be comprised of the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. So to emphasize, there's one set of rules for handicapping to be consistent with other governance functions. And the USGA and the RNA currently govern the game with a global set of playing rules, equipment rules, and rules of amateur status. And in 2020, we'll be adding the final piece to the puzzle for the governance by implementing the World Handicap System, which consists of the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. And the course rating system is the same system we use in the United States and many other countries today. Under the WHS, it will be implemented around the world, so each golf course is rated the same way, and it's really the foundation of the World Handicap System, which allows handicaps to be truly universal and portable from course to course and country to country. So going through the hierarchy, starting with the USGA and the RNA, and together they are responsible for writing and interpreting the rules of handicapping and the course rating system. And this is based on recommendations received from the World Handicap Operations Committee. Next is the national associations, in this case the USGA, and they have exclusive rights to implement and administer the World Handicap System within its jurisdiction, including the issuance of a handicap index. And they also may delegate some of its responsibilities to the regional golf association or golf club. Next is the Allied Golf Associations, and these regional golf associations have specific responsibilities within the World Handicap System, and may be delegated additional obligations down from the USGA. Next is the Golf Club and Handicap Committee, and they are established by a golf club and are responsible for ensuring compliance with the golf club's specified obligations and responsibilities under the rules of handicapping. And the last is the player, which is their duty is to submit scores to provide reasonable evidence of their demonstrated ability by playing by the rules of golf and attesting or reviewing the scores and handicap index of fellow players. So the full rights and responsibilities of each stakeholder are outlined in Appendix A in the Rules of Handicapping book. Fundamentals of handicapping. So the purpose of the World Handicap System, which includes the rules of handicapping and the course rating system, is to enable as many golfers as possible the opportunity to obtain and maintain a handicap index, use their handicap index on any golf course around the world, and to compete or play recreationally with anyone else on a fair basis. So it really, to stress the three aspects and key principles of the World Handicap System, it's to create a system that is as inclusive and welcoming as possible, making it as easy as possible for golfers to maintain and obtain and maintain a handicap index. The system also gives golfers worldwide a handicap which is portable from course to course and country to country. And the third point is that the system helps to calculate handicaps worldwide consistently and enabling golfers from all over the world to come together and play on a fair basis. And ultimately, the World Handicap System is good for the already global game of golf. Okay, so go through some key definitions. We'll start with low handicap index, which is the lowest handicap index achieved by a player within the last 12 months. The hard and soft cap, which is a reduction or limit on the increase of a player's handicap index over a rolling 12-month period. And this is measured against the player's low handicap index within that period of time. So the soft cap is a reduction in the rate of upward movement of a handicap index, and the hard cap is a maximum limit on the upward movement of a handicap index. And we'll cover more on this later in the presentation. The playing conditions calculation, which is a procedure used to evaluate if a course or weather conditions on the day of play deviate from the normal playing conditions to that extent that they have a significant impact on players' performance. Exceptional score reduction, which is a score differential which is at least 7.0 strokes better than the player's handicap index at the time the round was played. And you can see Rule 5.9 for this information as well. Net double bogey, which is the maximum score for a hole for handicap purposes, which is the sum of the par of the hole, any handicap strokes applied to that hole, and an additional 2 strokes. This is essentially replacing the equitable stroke control and sets a maximum score for a hole based on the par and the strokes given or received. And the last key definition is net par, which is it's a new term for par plus, used when a hole is not played. So the course rating system, the USGA course rating system is already in use, not only in connection with the USGA handicap system, but also with other existing handicap systems. And the course rating system addresses the portability of handicaps by adjusting a player's handicap index according to the relative difficulty of the golf course being played. And as you can see on the example on the right, we have a scratch player and a bogey player playing at the same time under the same weather conditions, but from different tees, and each player performs differently, even on the same course, just from different tees. So for the course handicap, under the rules of handicapping, course handicap will be the number of strokes the player receives to play down to the par of the tees being played. And that formula is the course handicap equals to the handicap index times slope rating divided by 113 plus the course rating minus par. And this poses the most significant change for golfers in the United States, as under the current USGA handicap system, course handicap represents the number of strokes needed to play to the course rating for the tees being played. And in 2020, the benchmark will now be par, which may be intuitive to many, but will generate questions starting in 2020 because their course handicap will change as a result of the new calculation. And by applying course rating minus par adjustment, in essence, it simplifies the process of making the 3-5 adjustment for stroke allocation for players playing from multiple tees, making it a lot easier for club chairs or coordinators to not have to do the extra calculation, really making it really easy because it automatically factors it into the calculation for course handicap, as long as you're selecting the correct tee that they're playing from. Oftentimes when you're doing that calculation, there was a lot of confusion as to the adjustments, so it's a kind of a welcoming change as it makes it a lot easier to do where you don't have to do any additional work. And the AGAs, in this case, us, the Hawaii State Golf Association, we have the responsibility of adjudicating par since par will be used in the course handicap calculation and impact the score posted for net, double bogey, and net par. So to go through a couple of examples, for looking at course handicap calculation without course rating minus par, so this is under the current USGA handicap system, you can see that the scratch golfer and the bogey golfer, there is little to no change in their course handicap, where you can see that the scratch player, their course handicap from all tees is a 0, and the bogey player only fluctuates plus or minus 3. And one thing to note is that there is a significant difference in yardage, whereas it is a nearly 2,100 yard difference from the black tee to the gold tee. And when you look at, so if we're looking at the scratch player with the USGA handicap system on the left, current, and the WHS on the right, you can see that the scratch player goes from a 2 from the black tees to a +5 from the gold, whereas again you can see on the left under the current system that scratch player stays at a 0 from all the tees. And also in comparison, when looking at the bogey golfer, the 15.0 today is an 18 from the black, and in 2020 with the course rating minus par adjustment, that 15.0 goes from a course handicap of 20 from the black to 10 from the gold. So it's a lot better and representative of players' ability. So playing handicap, when handicap allowances are used in various formats of play, course handicaps are adjusted to make the competition equitable. And within the rules of handicapping, the adjusted course handicap will be referred to as a playing handicap. And that calculation is course handicap times handicap allowance. And if different tees are in use, a player's playing handicap is adjusted by the difference in par. So if you note the animation on the right, a 15 handicap player, his playing handicap would be 15 as his course handicap times his allowance of 0.85, and resulting in a 13 handicap for that player for his playing handicap. So there will need to be an adjustment when players compete from different tees where par is different, but this happens much less frequently than players competing from different tees with a different course rating. Okay, so the minimum scores to obtain a handicap index. So 54 holes made up of any combination of 9 or 18 holes. There's no time limit on completing the submission of these scores, and then there's a strong recommendation that the initial scores are submitted hole by hole to better assess the playing potential of the player. Currently, under the USGA handicap system, the requirement is 5 18-hole scores before a player can be issued a handicap index, and it's switching to 54 holes in any combination of 9 or 18 holes. And this is to really stress on the overarching theme of the World Handicap System, which is to become more inclusive, and it will hopefully encourage golfers who play more sporadically to establish and maintain a handicap index. So the maximum handicap index. The maximum handicap index that can be allocated is increasing to 54.0. And again, this is to speak on the two key principles of the World Handicap System, which is to be more inclusive and accessible as possible, and to make it as easy as possible for golfers to obtain and maintain a handicap index. So we all know that there are high handicap golfers on the golf courses today, and providing these golfers with the handicap index they truly need will help them better track their progress, stay motivated, have more fun, and keep playing. So the maximum score for handicap purposes. So that is the net double bogey, and it's defined on the right here as the player's maximum hole score for handicap purposes, which ensures that bad holes don't impact the player's handicap too severely. So even the best golfers have bad holes, and the occasional bad hole shouldn't define or reflect the player's ability. And the maximum hole score ensures that bad holes don't impact a player's handicap index too severely, and this presents a significant change to golfers in the United States, where we are moving from the equitable stroke control procedure to net double bogey. So go through an example of the maximum score for net double bogey. Its equation is right here. So net double bogey equals to par plus 2 plus or minus any handicap strokes given or received on that hole. And so, for example, a player with a course handicap of 11 receives 1 stroke on the first 11 allocated stroke holes. So on a par 4 with a stroke index of 6, the player's net double bogey score is calculated as follows. So par, which is 4, plus 2 strokes for the double bogey, plus 1 stroke given, equals to a max score of 7 for that player on that hole. And so to look at another example, if you're looking at Janet Smith here with a course handicap of 18, and you can see on the 17th hole with a stroke index of 6, so to the double bogey adjustment of -1 for her because of the par, plus 2, plus given 1 stroke, because the maximum score is 7. So for the purposes of handicapping, her score posted will be a 94, but for a competition, her score is a 95. Okay. So for holes not played, when a player does not play a hole, the score recorded for handicap purposes is net par. So for example, a hole being declared out of play by the committee or for maintenance or reconstruction purposes, the player would post a net par for that hole. And this procedure for posting a score for a hole not played really remains the same. It's just the name is changing from par plus, which is now called net par. So for the treatment of 9-hole scores and combining, so the combining of 2 9-hole scores to create an 18-hole score differential. So if a player plays 7 or more holes but fewer than the minimum number of holes for an 18-hole score to be acceptable, then the 9-hole score will be posted and then combined with the next 9-hole score. So this process doesn't present a change for golfers in the United States. The one thing to note is that the 9-hole scores are combined in the order that they're received. So it uses the next available 9-hole score to combine to create an 18-hole score differential. One thing that is changing from this is the minimum number of holes required for an 18-hole score will be 14. Currently, under the current system, it's 13, but the change is very minimal. It's just changing to 14. So the time frame for submitting a score. So a player should submit their score as soon as possible on the day of play and preferably before midnight local time. This also presents a change with the daily revisions. Currently, under the current system, scores would have to be posted before midnight Eastern time to be factored into the calculation for the revision, whereas in 2020 it is based on local time midnight, so a little bit better for keeping track of when you have to post scores by, or the deadline to post it, to be factored into the calculation for the next day. And if a player does not submit their score on the day of play, like I mentioned, their score will not be included within the daily playing conditions calculation. So the playing conditions calculation is also a day-by-day basis. So if it's not posted during that day, essentially it will not be factored into the data pool for the playing conditions calculation, and it won't reflect an accurate handicap index as well. And when the score is subsequently posted to the player scoring record, the published playing conditions calculation for the day should be applied to the player's score differential calculation. That's what I just mentioned. And so really want to emphasize on the importance of posting as soon as possible after playing, which again ensures the accuracy of a player's handicap index on the next day, and allows for their score to contribute to the data pool, which determines if an adjustment for abnormal playing conditions is made or not. And we'll cover more on that later in the presentation as well. Okay, so I'm going to switch it over to let Blake take over for a little bit.
Okay, everyone. Thanks, Barry. So moving on to handicap formula. So we'll talk about the handicap index calculation. So overall, there are 5 significant changes to the handicap index calculation that you'll see in 2020. We'll get into each one individually, but keep in mind that the overall goal of the calculation is to be inclusive, modern, and consistent, all while making the lives of handicap committees and golf administrators a little easier. So number 1, we've got the minimum number of scores required. So in 2020, the minimum scores required will be 3 18-hole scores. Number 2, we'll be using 8 differentials out of 20 to calculate the handicap index. The PCC, playing conditions calculation, accounts for variations in weather and course setup. Number 4, exceptional score reduction. It looks at all posted scores. And lastly, the addition of a soft cap and a hard cap limit for upward movement. We'll talk about that here pretty quick. So for an 18-hole score, a score differential is calculated as follows. So we've got 113 divided by the slope rating times the adjusted gross score minus the course rating and any PCC adjustment. Generally, the PCC is conservative in nature, so we expect the vast majority of the time the PCC adjustment will just be a 0. Calculation of a score differential. Not a new concept here, but worth sharing as a reminder. If we look at the example here, this arrow indicates that this player shot a 97, but has an 18.7 after the calculation of a score differential, which is their lowest score differential of the 3 here. So for the 20 scores, we'll be reducing the number of score differentials that are used in handicapping calculation, going from a 10 best of 20 system with the 96% bonus for excellence to an 8 best of 20 system. And the 8 of 20 system, which rounds to the nearest 10th, will allow for greater responsiveness for good scores, and will eliminate the need for a bonus for excellence, which is often difficult to explain and confuses people on the calculation. So omitting that really does well. Considering higher handicap players typically have more fluctuation within their scoring records, using this 8 of 20 will allow their best scores to weigh more heavily and to create more equity throughout the full range of handicaps. We've got a sample calculation here. So in this instance, here on the left, you've got the 10 out of 20 with the 0.96 condition of excellence, and the 8 out of 20 result in an increase of 0.4 strokes. It is important to note that a player will not have to start anew for the WHS. Scoring records will be carried over and will be calculated under the WHS formula starting in January. PCC, or playing conditions calculation. So we know golf is an outdoor sport, and sometimes the playing conditions can cause scores to be abnormally high or low on any given day. A score of 80 on a rainy, windy day, or a day where the course is set up more difficult than normal, may be more impressive than a 79 on a calm day with a normal course conditions. So the PCC will account for this and adjust score differentials to better reflect the player's actual performance. Any adjustment will be clearly identified in the player's scoring record for transparency. As noted on the slide here, the adjustments will be applied conservatively and will be in integer values. You won't see an adjustment of a plus 1.45. The range there is -1 to +3. The calculation will be an automatic computation service. So the calculation will be purely data-driven. The more posted scores, the more posted scores below or above expected based on course and slope ratings and the handicap of a player, the more likely an adjustment will take place. And this is one of the more modern features that we'll be including in the WHS. More on the PCC, it can also be used to indicate when the course rating of a golf course may need to be reviewed. If the PCC adjustment, which again is conservative in nature, is being applied 4 to 5 days a week, the ratings may not accurately be reflecting the difficulty of the golf course, often due to issues with the course setup. Some other notes about PCC. So it's performed only once a day. It considers acceptable scores submitted on a golf course, including all rated tees and both genders. It does require at least 8 acceptable scores submitted by players with a handicap index of 36 or below. It's applied in the calculation of score differentials for all players, and it includes both 9 and 18 hole acceptable scores. So the ESR, exceptional score reduction, is a procedure that will essentially replace the current 10-3 reduction process and will simplify the automatic reduction altogether. It considers all scores rather than just tournament scores, so that any time a player demonstrates ability that is significantly better than their index suggests, a simple automatic adjustment is made. If a player posts a score that produces a score differential 7.0 strokes or better than their handicap index at the time the score was submitted, an automatic adjustment is made by using this display table. Here we see score differential relative to index and the ESR adjustment. So 7.0 to 9.9 strokes lower, you'll receive a -1, and a 10.0 or more strokes lower, you'll receive a -2. Subsequent scores posted will not contain the -1 or the -2 adjustment, which allows the impact of the ESR to slowly reduce as new scores are posted. It'll be easier to explain not only how players get reduced, but also how posting scores will allow the reduction to naturally work itself out. So limit on upward movement of a handicap index. So there is no limit on the amount by which a player's handicap index can decrease. There are 2 trigger points that will limit extreme upward movement of a handicap index. And here you see on the graphic, your handicap index should never increase more than 5 strokes above your low handicap index over a rolling 12-month period. So the cap procedure, the soft and hard cap will be implemented to ensure that a temporary loss of form does not cause a player's handicap index to move too far from a level consistent with their demonstrated ability. The caps also serve as an anti-abuse safeguards and will aid in minimizing the potential for handicap manipulation. The handicap committee at the club will still play a key role and have the ability to allow a player's index to exceed the hard cap if special circumstances such as an injury exist. Some key points here: this fixed limit will be incorporated into the system to eliminate the capacity for further more extreme upward movement of a handicap index within a specific period of time. This favors the consistent player. The volatile player will be impacted more often, which is a good system for a handicap to have. The temporary loss of form should not cause a player's handicap index to move too far from a level which is consistent with their underlying ability, and a low handicap index or anchor is part of the system and should be made visible to the player. Here we see the soft cap suppresses upward movement by 50% after 3.0 stroke increase over the low handicap index has been reached. The hard cap will restrict upward movement to 5.0 strokes over the low handicap index. And the soft and hard cap procedures will only start to take effect once a player has at least 20 acceptable scores in their scoring record. Moving on to the daily revisions. So under the rules of handicapping, a handicap index will update the day after a score is posted. This is known as daily revisions, but we want to make it clear that a revision only takes place after a day where a player posts a score or a committee adjustment was applied. Revisions will take place at midnight following the submission of a score. Players should, let's see, skip through here a little bit. So it's not a real-time revision. In other words, if someone plays twice in one day, their handicap index will still only update once on the following day. For any multi-day competitions, the committee can choose to use the handicap index at the start of the competition or use an updated handicap index for each round. If using the same handicap index for the duration of the competition, the scores would still need to be submitted daily. Moving on to club handicap committee responsibilities. So handicap review, it is strongly recommended that the handicap committee conducts a handicap review at least once a year for all players which it is responsible. WHS compliant technology will provide reports to assist handicap committees to identify those players requiring a handicap review. A player can request a handicap review if they believe their handicap index no longer reflects their demonstrated ability. And lastly, a player must be made aware of and be involved in the handicap review process, as well as be able to make a appeal to the decision. Adjusting a handicap index. So when a handicap review has been completed, the handicap committee can adjust the player's handicap index to better reflect their demonstrated ability based on the results of the analysis. The adjustments must satisfy the following criteria. So they need to be a minimum of 1 full stroke, and except in exceptional circumstances, only increase a player's handicap index by up to the 5.0 strokes above their low handicap index. There is no limit as to how far downwards a handicap index can be adjusted. So the handicap committee can adjust a player's handicap index to ensure that it reflects their demonstrated ability. In doing so, the handicap committee should consider all available information relating to the player's demonstrated ability. This is including the player's scoring potential, any handicap previously held by the player, and whether the player is an improver, a steady player, or a declining player. The handicap committee should consult with or have ratified any player's handicap adjustment by their allied golf association. So penalty scores. This is not a change for golf clubs or golfers in the US, but just a reminder, penalty scores can either be equal to the highest or lowest score differential in their scoring record, determined by the handicap committee and on a case-to-case basis. If a player fails to submit a score from an authorized format of play, the handicap committee should investigate and take appropriate action. So that would be if the reason was valid and an acceptable score is still discoverable, the score will be posted. If there was no valid reason and an acceptable score is discoverable, that score will be posted. If the score is not discoverable, a penalty score may be posted. And in the most serious cases, such as repeated failure to submit acceptable scores, the committee has discretion to apply additional penalty scores, reset the player's handicap index, or consider other disciplinary procedures. On to competition committee responsibilities. So the competition committee determines who is eligible to compete, as well as the handicap a player may use for their event. For example, a maximum handicap index for entry, a maximum handicap index the player is permitted to use, a maximum course handicap, and a maximum playing handicap. So an example, limit of 18 may be set by a committee, with higher handicap index players being restricted to playing from a handicap index of 18 for the purposes of that competition. Even though the higher handicap players are restricted to playing from a handicap index of 18 in this example, their full course handicap should be used in determining the score to post for their handicap purposes. Okay, AGA responsibilities. I'm going to pass that one off to Barry.
Okay, so for the AGA responsibilities, basically the administration of a handicap index. So who issues the handicap index? So in order to use the World Handicap System, an association must be authorized by the USGA and the RNA. And within its area of jurisdiction, an authorized national association can use the rules of handicapping and the course rating system, use the registered marks of the World Handicap System, and issue a handicap index either directly or where delegated through a golf club. And starting in 2020, the USGA will be the entity that issues a handicap index. So for a home club, and to ensure that a player has only one handicap index and to easily identify the golf club or AGA, in this case, Hawaii State Golf Association, with authority should any issues arise. And a player should only have one home club. And this home club is determined by the player and is typically determined by where the player submits most of the scores or demonstrates regularity of play. So in essence, this doesn't change very much where you're still only allowed one handicap index and as well just the home club designation helps in case any issues for handicapping arise. So multi-membership is going to continue, but each player, again, will only have one handicap index and one scoring record. And where a player is a member of more than one club, it has to be clear which is their home club. And this allows the clubs to work together on handicap-related matters. So for the permanent modifications of a course, under some of the club responsibilities, is to notify the AGA, so in this case, the Hawaii State Golf Association, when permanent changes are made to a golf course. And the permanent changes to the course require that us as the Hawaii State Golf Association to review the current course rating and slope rating and to determine whether a re-rating is necessary. So a few other services provided by that we provide are adjudicating hole par, stroke index allocation, and the temporary rating for unrated tees. And for any questions and additional information regarding these topics, please don't hesitate to. You can either call our office or email me, and I'll send you more information regarding those issues. So for additional education, so for the clubs that are members in our association, there is a rules of handicapping quiz, which is required by all clubs to be authorized and licensed to use the World Handicap System. And this quiz takes approximately 20 minutes and requires a passing score of 80 or higher. And for the clubs in our association, the deadline to complete this is by December 30th of this year. So a few tools and resources that you can use to better equip yourself to take this quiz, since it is open book and open notes. You can use the Rules of Handicapping book, the Player's Guide or booklet, the committee guide, digital committee guide, videos, video snippets, infographics and posters, as well as online articles and common frequently asked questions on the WHS website, which is whs.com. Okay, so a few questions. We will be sending out, or if you did not receive the information regarding the quiz and any of those documents, we will be sending you out that link with the link to the quiz, as well as a few handouts with the five things to know and one-page summaries of the changes. So that helps you to take the quiz a little bit better. Okay, so now we'll open up to questions either in chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask any questions.